Have you ever seen Donnybrook Fair? Or in a cave-house spent the night? On Waterloo's plains, did you dare to engage in the terrific fight? Has your penchant for life ever led you to visit the Finnish or slums at the risk of your pockets and head? Or in Banco been fixed by the bums? In a smash at the hells have you been, when pigeons were plucked by the bone? Or enjoyed the magnificent scene when our fourth George ascended his throne? Have you ever heard Tierney or Canning A. Commons Division address? Or when to the gallery ganging, been floored by a rush from the press? Has your taste for the fine art impelled you to visit a bull bait or fight? Or by Rattles and Charlies propelled, in a watch house been lodged for the night? In a morning at Bow Street, made one of a group just to bother Sage Burney? Stood the racket, got fined, cut and run being fleeced by the watch and attorney? Or say, have you dined in Guildhall with the mayor and his corporate souls? Or been squeezed at a grand civic ball with dealers in tallow and coals? Mere nothings are these, though the range through all we have noticed you've been, when compared to the famed stock exchange, that riotous gambling scene. 111 . The unexpected legacy Bernard Blackmantle and Bob Transit visit Capel Court characters in the stocks bowls, bears and bawds, brokers, Jews and jobbers a new acquaintance. Peter Principal his account of the market the royal, exchange tricks upon travelers slating a stranger the Hebrew star, and his satellites dividend hunters and paragraph, writers the new bubble company's project extraordinary prospectus in rhyme of the life, death, burial, and resurrection, company lingual localisms of the stock, exchange explained the art and mystery of jobbing exposed anecdotes of the house, and its members flying a tile Billy Wrights, brown pony selling a twister a peep into Botany Bay Flats and flat catchers the Rotunda, and the transfer menhow to work the telegraph create, a rise put on the pot bang down the market hand waddle out a lame duck. A bequest of £500 by codicil from a rich old aunt had most unexpectedly fallen to my friend Transit, who, quite unprepared for such an overwhelming increase of good fortune, was pondering on the best means of applying this sudden acquisition of capital, when I accidentally paid him a visit in Half Moon Street. "Give me joy, Bernard," said Bob. "Here's a windfall," thrusting the official notice into my hand. £500 from an old female miser, who during her lifetime was never known to dispense 5 farthings for any generous or charitable purpose. But being about to slip her wind and make a wind-up of her accounts, was kind enough to remember at parting that she had a poor relation, and 112 artist, to whom such a sum might prove serviceable, so just hooked me on to the tail end of her testamentary document and booked me this legacy, before she booked herself inside for the other world. "And now, my dear Bernard," continued Bob, "you are a man of the world, one who knows what's what, and that's as high as metaphysic wit can fly. I am puzzled, actually bewildered what to do with this accumulation of wealth. Only consider an eccentric artist with £500 in his pocket, why it must prove his death warrant, unless immediate measures are taken to free him from its magical influence. Shall I embark it in some of the new speculations? The milk company or the water company, the flesh, fish, or fowl companies, railways or tunnelways, or in short, only put me in the right way, for, at present, I am mightily abroad in that respect. Then my advice is that you keep your money at home, or in other words, fund it, unless you wish to be made fun of and laughed at for a milksop, or a bubble merchant, or be taken for one of the Gudgeon family, or a chicken butcher, a member of the poultry company, where fowl dealing is considered all fair, or become a liveryman of the worshipful company of miners, i.e. miners, where you may be fleeced a la Hain, by legs, lawyers, bankers and brokers, demi-reps and contractors. Or, perhaps, you 113 will feel disposed to embark in a new company, of which I have just strung together a prospectus in rhyme. A speculation which has, at least, much of novelty in this country to recommend it, and equally interests all orders of society. When it is not surprising, we see, that lawyers, bankers, and brokers are found at the bottom of most of the new schemes. Their profits are certain, whatever the fate of the Gudgeon family. The brokers, in particular, have a fine harvest of it. Their charges being upon the full nominal amount of the shares sold, they get twice as much by transferring a single 100L. Share in a speculation, although only 1L, may have been paid on it, as by the purchase or sale of 100L. Consols, of which the price is 94L. Or, to make the matter plainer to the uninitiated, suppose an individual wishes to lay out 500L. In the stock market, if he orders his broker to purchase into the British funds, the latter will buy him about 535L. 3%, consols, and the brokerage at 1/8% will be about 13s. But if the same person desires to invest the same sum in the stock of a new mine or railroad company, which is divided into 100L, shares on each of which say 1L, is paid and there is a premium of 1L. As is the case at this moment with a stock we have in our eye, his broker's account will then stand thus. Bought 250 shares in the company. First installment of 1L. Paid £250.00. Premium L. Per share 250.00. 500.00. Brokerage £% on 25,000L. Stock 62.10. 562.10. Which will leave Mr. Adventurer to pay 62L. Tens to his broker and to pay 99L. More on each of his 250 shares when the company call for it. Or let us reverso the case and suppose our speculator, having been an original subscriber for 100 shares in the company and having consequently obtained them for nothing, wishes to sell, finding them at a premium of 6s per share, and either fearing they may go lower, or not being able to pay even the first installment called for by the directors. If he is an humble tradesman, he is perhaps eager to realize a profit obtained without labor, and hugs himself at the idea of the 100 crowns and the 100 shillings he shall put into his pocket by this pleasant process. Away he posts to Cornhill, searches out a broker, into whose hands he puts the letter entitling him to the 100 shares, with directions to sell at the current premium. The broker takes a turn round, change, finds a customer, and the whole affair is settled in a twinkling, by an entry or two in the broker's memorandum book, and the drawing of a couple of checks. Our fortunate speculator, who is anxiously waiting at Batson's the return of his man of business, and spending perhaps 3s. 6d. In bad negus and tough sandwiches, on the strength of his good luck, is then presented with a draft on a banker for 5L. Neatly folded up in a small slip of foolscap, containing the following satisfactory particulars. Sold 100 shares in the company nothing paid prem. 6s. £30. Brokerage 14% on 10,000L. Stock 25. By check 5. He stares wildly at this document, utterly speechless, for 5 minutes, during which the broker, after saying he shall be happy to do for him another time, throws a card on the table and exit. The lucky speculator wanders into change with the account in his hand, and appeals to several Jews to know whether he has not been cheated. Some abuse him for the insinuation against so respectable a man as Mr. the Broker. Others laugh in his face, and all together hustle him into the street. He goes home richer by 4L. 16s. 6d. Then when he went out, and finds that a wealthy customer, having called 3 times in his absence to give him a particular order, had just left the shop in a rage, swearing he would no longer encourage so inattentive a tradesman. Examiner. The Life, Death, Burial, and Resurrection Company. Capital 100 millions, shares £1. Tilde 115 tilde tilde. In this age of projectors, when bubbles are spread with elusive attractions to bother each head, when bulls, bears, Jews, and jobbers all quit Capelcourt to become speculators and join in the sport, who can wonder, when interest with intellect clashes? We should have a new club to dispose of our ashes, to rob death of its terrors, and make it delightful to give up your breath, and abolish the frightful old custom of lying defunct in your shroud, surrounded by relatives sobbing aloud. We've a scheme that shall mingle the grave with the gay, and make it quite pleasant to die when you may. First, then, we propose with the graces of art, like our Parisian friends, to make every tomb smart, and, by changing the feelings of funeral terrors, remove what remained of old Catholic errors. Our plan is to blend in the picturesque style smirk, Soane, Nash, and Wyatville all in one pile. So novel, agreeable, and grateful our scheme, that death will appear like a sweet summer's dream, and the horrid idea of a gloomy, cold cell will vanish like vapors of mist from a dell. Thus changed, who'll object a kind friend to inhume, when his sepulchre's made like a gay drawing-room 1A diversified, soothing commixture of trees umbrageous and fanned by the perfumed breeze, with alcoves and bowers and fish ponds and shrubs, select, as in life, from intrusion of scrubs, while o'er your last relics the violet turf press must a flattering promise afford of success. Lie light on him, earth, sung a poet of old, our earth shall be sifted, and never grow cold, no rude weight on your chest how like ye our scheme, one, where your grave will be warmed by a process of steam, which will boil all the worms and the grubs in their holes, and preserve from decay every part but your souls. Our cemetery, centered in fancy's domain, shall by a state edict eternal remain to all parties open, the living or dead, or Christian or atheist, here rest their head, in a picturesque garden and deep shady grove, where young love smiles and fashion delighteth to rove. To render the visitors' comforts complete, and afford the grieved mourners a proper retreat, the directors intend to erect an hotel, where a table d'hote will be furnished well, not with the cold meats of a funeral feast, but a banquet that's worthy a nabob at least, of lacrima Christi, and fine vin de grave, and cordial compounds, a choice you may have. Twice a week, teas propose to illumine the scene, and to waltz and quadrille on the velvety green, while colonets band and the opera corps play and dance with a spirit that's quite con amare. A committee of taste will superintend the designs and inscriptions to each latter end. 117 . Take notice, no crossbones or skulls are allowed, or naked young cherubims riding a cloud. In short, no allusions that savor of death, nor aught that reminds of a friend's parting breath. The inscriptions and epitaphs, elegies too, must all be poetical, lively, and new, such as never were heard of or seen heretofore, to be written by Proctor Sam Rogers or Moore. In lieu of a sermon, glee singers attend, who will chant like the cherubims, praise without end. 3 decent old women, to enliven the hours, attend with gay garlands and sacred flowers, the emblems of grief artificial, tease true, but very like nature in a general view. Lord Graves will preside, and Vice President Coffin will pilot the public into the offing. The College of Surgeons and Humane Society have promised to send a delightful variety. The visitors all are physicians of fame, and success we may therefore dead certainty name. To the delicate nervous, who'd wish a snug spot, a romantic temple or moss-covered grot, let them haste to John Ebers and look at the plan where the grave book lies open, its merits to scan. Gloves, hatbands, and essence of onions for crying, white kerchiefs and snuff, and a cordial worth trying, the attendants have ready. And more as time presses, no objection to bury you in fancy dresses. Our last proposition may frighten you much. We propose to reanimate all by a touch, by magic revive, if a century old, the bones of a father, a friend, or a scold. In short, we intend, for all but a wife, to bring whom you please in a moment to life. That is, if the shares in our company rise, if not 'tis a bubble, like others, of lies. Bernard Blackmantle. The recitation of this original Jew disparate had, I found, the salutary effect of clearing my friend Transit's vision in respect to the speculation mania. And being by this time fully accoutred and furnished with the possibles, we sallied forth to make a purchase in the public funds. There is something to be gleaned from every event in this life, particularly by the eccentric who is in search of characteristic matter. I had recently been introduced to a worthy but singular personage, in the city, Mr. Peter Principal, stockbroker, of the firm of Hazard & Co. A man whose probity was never yet called in question, and who, having realized a large property by the most honorable means, was continually selected as broker, trustee, and executor by all his acquaintance. To him, therefore, I introduced my friend Bob, who being instantly relieved from all his weighty troubles, and receiving in return the bank receipts, we proceeded to explore the regions of Pluto, i.e., the money market, attended by Peter Principal as our guide and instructor. On our entrance into Capel Court, we were assailed by a motley group of Jews and Gentiles, inhabitants of Lower Tartary, i.e., Botany Bay too, who, suspecting we came there on business, addressed us in a jargon that was completely unintelligible either to Transit or myself. One fellow inquired if I was a bull 3, and his companion wished to know if Transit was a bear 4. Another eagerly offered to give us 5/8 or sell us at the same price for the account 5, while a fourth thrust his to a place so named, without the stock exchange, where the lame ducks and fallen angels of Upper Tartary assemble when expelled the house, to catch a hint how the puffs and bangs succeed in the private gambling market, when if they can saddle their neighbor before he is up to the variation, it is thought good jobbing. 3 persons that purchase, with a view for a rise in the funds. 4 one who sells with a view to a fall in the price of stock. 5 a certain future day, fixed upon by the committee of the stock exchange. For the settlement of time bargains they are usually appointed at an interval of 6 weeks, and the price of stocks on this given day determines the speculator's gain or loss. Copper countenance into my face and offered to do business with me at a fiddle. 6. Tush, tush, said Peter Principal to the increasing multitude which now barred our passage. We are only come to take a look and watch the operation of the market. Dividend hunter 7, I suppose, said a knowing-looking fellow, sarcastically. Ear-wigging 8 hey, mister. Principal, something good for the pull-out 9. Well, if the gentlemen wish to put on the pot, although it be for a pony, 10, I'm their man, only a little rasping. 11, you know. To this eloquent appeal succeeded a similar application from a son of Israel, who offered to accommodate us in any way we wished, either for the call 2 or put 13. To which friendly offer little Principal put his direct negative, and, after innumerable 6, when a broker has got money transactions of any consequence, as there is no risk in these cases, he will fiddle one finger across the other, signifying by this that the jobber must give up half the turn of the market price to him, which he pockets besides his commission. 7, those who suppose by changing stock they get double interest, by receiving 4 dividends in 1 year instead of 2. But in this they are deceived, as the jobber, when he changes stock, gains the advantage. For instance, if he buys consols at 60, when he sells out there will be deducted 1.5%. For the dividend, 8, when bargains are done privately by a whisper, to conceal the parties being a bull. 9, buying or selling for ready money. 10, pony, 25,000 L. 11, giving greater turns to the jobbers than those regulated in the market. 12, call. Buying to call more at 1/8 or 1/4 above the price on a certain day, if the buyer chooses, and the price is in his favor. 13, put. Selling to put more to it on a certain day, at 1/8 or 1/4 under the market price. 120 attacks of this sort, we reached the upper end of the court, and found ourselves upon the steps which lead to the regions of Upper Tartary, i.e., the stock exchange. At this moment, our friend Principal was summoned by his clerk to attend some antique spinster, who, having scraped together another 100, had hobbled down to annex it to her previous amount of consols. You must not attempt to enter the room by yourselves, said Principal, but accompany me back to the Royal Exchange, where you can walk and wait until I have completed the old lady's job. While Principal was gone to invest his customers' stock, we amused ourselves with observing the strange variety of character which everywhere presents itself among the groups of all nations who congregate together in this arena of commerce. Perhaps a more fortunate moment for such a purpose could not have occurred. The speculative transactions of the times had drawn forth a certain portion of the stock exchange, gamblers, or inhabitants of Upper Tartary, who, like experienced sharpers of another description, never suffer a good thing to escape them. Capel Court was partially abandoned for exchange bubbles. 14, and new companies opened a new system of fraudulent enrichment for these sharks of the money market. 14, the speculative mania, which at this time raged with unprecedented violence among a large portion of His Majesty's liege subjects, gave the John Bull a glorious opportunity for one of their witty satires, in which the poet has very humorously described the bubbles of 1825. Tune run, neighbors, run. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous projects that amuse John Bull. Run, take a peep on change, for anxious crowds beset us there. each trying which can make himself the greatest gull. No sooner are they puffed than a universal wish there is for shares in mines, insurances in foreign loans and fisheries. 121. No matter where the project lies, so violent the mania in Africa, New Providence, Peru, or Pennsylvania. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. Few folks for news very anxious at this crisis are, for marriages and deaths and births, no thirst exists all take the papers in, to find out what the prices are of shares in this or that, upon the brokers' lists. The doctor leaves his patient the pedagogue his lexicon for minds of real Monty, or for those of Anglo-Mexican, and Chili bonds don't cool the rage, nor those still more romantic, sir, for new canals to join the seas, Pacific and Atlantic, sir. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. At home we have projects, too, for draining surplus capital, and honest Master Johnny of his cash to chouse, though t'other day, Judge Abbott gave a rather sharpish slap at all. And Eldon launched his thunder from the upper house. Investment banks to lend a lift to people who are undone proposals for assurance there's no end of that, in London, and one amongst the number, who in Parliament now press their bills for lending cash at 8% on coats and inexpressibles. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. No more with her bright pails, the milkman's rosy daughter works a company must serve you now with milk and cream. Perhaps they've some connection with the advertising waterworks, that promise to supply you from the limpid stream. Another body corporate would fain some pence and shillings get, by selling fish at Hungerford and knocking up old Billingsgate. Another takes your linen, when it's dirty, to the suds, sir, and brings it home in carriages with 4 nice bits of blood, sir. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. 122. When Greenwich coaches go by steam on roads of iron railing, sir, how pleasant it will be to see a dozen in a line, and ships of heavy burden over hills and valleys sailing, sir, shall cross from Bristol's channel to the Tweed or Tyne. And Dame Speculation, if she ever fully hath her ends, will give us docks at Bermondsey, St. Saviour's and St. Catherine's, while side long bridges over mud, shall fill the folks with wonder, sir, and lamplight tunnels all day long convey the cockneys under, sir. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. A tunnel underneath the sea, from Calais straight to Dover, sir, that Qualmish folks may cross by land from shore to shore, with sluices made to drown the French, if e'er they would come over, sir, has long been talked of, till at length, Tease thought a monstrous bore. Amongst the many scheming folks, I take it he's no ninny, sir, who bargains with the Ashantees to fish the coast of Guinea, sir. For, secretly, Tease known that another brilliant view he has of lighting up the famous town of Timbuktu with oil gas. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. Then a company is formed, though not yet advertising, to build, upon a splendid scale, a large balloon, and send up tools and broken stones for fresh macadamizing the new-discovered turnpike roads which cross the moon. But the most inviting scheme of all is one proposed for carrying large furnaces to melt the ice, which hems poor Captain Perry in. They'll then have steamboats twice a week to all the newly seen land, and call for goods and passengers at Labrador and Greenland. Run, neighbors, run. You're just in time to get a share in all the famous bubbles that amuse John Bull. 123 high. Change was a subject full of the richest materials for my friend Bob, who, without knowing more of the characters than their exterior appearances of eccentricity and costume exhibited, proceeded to book, as he termed it, the leading features. Every now and then, there was a rush to different parts of the arena, and an appearance of great anxiety among the crowd to catch the attention of a person who flourished a large parchment above their heads with all the pride and importance of a field marshal's baton. This was, I found, no other than the leading agent of some newly projected company, who took this method of indulging the subscribers with shares, or letting the fortunate applicants know how many of these speculative chances the committee had allowed them to possess. The return of Little Principal afforded me a key to the surrounding group, without which their peculiar merits would have been lost to the world, or have remained individually unknown, like the profit of many of the modern speculations. "You must not suppose," said Principal, "that great talents make great wealth here, or that honorable conduct and generous feelings command respect. No such thing. Men are estimated upon change in proportion to the supposed amount of their property, and rise or fall in the worldly opinion of their associates as prosperity or adversity operates upon the barometer of their fortunate speculations. A lucky hit will cause a dolt to be pointed out as a clever fellow, when, the next turn of the market proving unsuccessful, he is despised and insulted. So much are the frequenters of change influenced by the most sordid and mercenary feelings, that almost all of them are the willing dupes of riches and good fortune. However, as you are strangers here, gentlemen, I will introduce you, entrenus, to a few of the characters who thrive by the destruction of thousands of their fellow creatures. The bashaw in black yonder, who rests his elephantic trunk against a pillar of the exchange, with his hands thrust into his breeches pockets, is the Hebrew strata Jewish luminary, a very Shiloh among the peoples of his own persuasion, and, I am sorry to say, much too potent tilde 124 tilde with the orthodox ministers of George IV. The fellow's insolence is intolerable, and his vulgarity and ignorance quite unbearable. He commenced his career in Manchester by vending trinkets and spectacle cases in the streets of that town, from which station he gradually rose to the important occupation of a dealer in fag ends, from which he ascended to the dignity of a bill broker, when, having the command of money, and some wealthy Hebrew relatives conveniently distributed over the continent for the transaction of business, he took up his abode in London, and towards the termination of the late war, when a terrible smash took place among some of his tribe, he found means to obtain their confidence, and having secured, by the aid of spies, the earliest foreign intelligence, he rapidly made a colossal fortune in the British funds without much risk to himself. It is said he can scarcely write his own name, and it only requires a minute's conversation to inform you of the general ignorance of his mind. In short, he is one of Hazlitt's men, with only one idea, but that one entirely directed to the accumulation of gold. A few years since some of the more respectable members of the Stock Exchange, perceiving the thraldom in which the public funds of the country were held by the tricks and maneuvers of the Jew party, determined to make a stand against them. Among these was a highly respected member of Parliament, a great sporting character, and a very worthy man. His losses proved excessive, but they were promptly paid. In order to weaken his credit, and if possible, shake his confidence and insult his feelings, the Jew took an opportunity during high change of telling him dat he had got his coat and waistcoat, and he should very soon have his shirt into de bargain. In this prophecy, however, Mr. Mordecai was mistaken, for the market took a sudden turn, and the gentleman alluded to recovered all his losses in a short time, to the great discomfiture tilde 125 tilde of the high priest and the Jews. In private life he is equally abrupt and vulgar, as the following anecdote will prove, at his own table. A Christian broker solicited some trifling favor, observing he had granted what he then requested to another member of the house, who was his brother-in-law. Very true, said Solomon Gruff, as he is sometimes called, but then you do not sleep vid my shister, my boy, dat makes all de difference. At present, this fellow's influence is paramount at most of the courts of Europe, at some of which his family enjoy considerable honors. In short, he is the head of the locust tribe, and the leader of that class of speculators whom a witty writer has well described in the following lines, addressed to the landholders. The national debt may be esteemed a mass of filth which grows corrupter every day, and in this heap, as always comes to pass reptiles and vermin breed, exist, decay. 'Tis now so huge that he must be an ass who thinks it ever can be cleared away, and the time's quickly coming, to be candid, when funded men will swallow up the landed. Then will these debt-bred reptiles, hungry vermin, fed from the mass corrupt of which I spoke, usurp your place. A Jew, a dirty German, who has grown rich by many a lucky stroke, shall rule the minister, and all determined to treat your bitter sufferings as a joke. Said I, he shall. It will be nothing new. The treasury now is governed by a Jew. The tall, dandy-looking youth standing near the great man is a scion of the former head of the Hebrew family. His father possessed very superior talents, but was too much attached to splendid society to die rich. His banquets were often graced by royalty, and his liberality and honorable conduct proverbial, until misfortune produced a catastrophe that will not bear tilde 126 tilde repeating. The very name of the sire causes a feeling of dislike in the breast of the colossus, and consequently the son is no partaker in the good things which the great man has to dispose of. The three tall Jews standing together are brothers, and all members of the stock exchange. Their affinity to the high priest, more than their own talents, renders their fortunes promising. Observe the pale-faced, genteel-looking man on the right-hand side of the arena. That is Major G.S., an unsuccessful speculator in the funds, but a highly honorable officer, who threw away the proceeds of his campaigns in the peninsula among the sharks of the stock exchange and the lesser gamblers of St. James's. He has lately given to the world a sketch of his own life, under the assumed name of Ned Clinton or the Commissary, in which he has faithfully narrated scenes and characters. The little, jolly, fresh-colored gentleman near him is Tommy B.H., a great speculator in the funds, a lottery contractor and wine merchant, and quite at home in the tea trade. The immense fat gent behind him is called the dinner man and M.C. of Vauxhall, of which place Tommy B.H. holds a principal share. His office is to write lyrics for the lottery, and gunpowder puffs for the Genuine Tea Company, paragraphs for Vauxhall, and spirited compositions in praise of spiritless wines. Amid all these occupations, it is no wonder, considering his bulk, that he invariably falls asleep before the dinner cloth is removed, and snores most mellifluously between each round of the bottle. The sharp-visaged personage to the left of him is the well-known Count Bounce. "Excuse me, Mr. Principal," said I, "but I happen to know that worthy well myself. That is, I believe, Sam Dixon, the coper of Barbican, a jobber in the funds, it would appear, as well as in horses, coaches, and chaises. Of the last named article, I have had a pretty good specimen from his emporium myself, tilde 127 tilde which, I must ever remember, was at the risk of my life. Do you observe that stout-looking gentleman yonder with large red whiskers, in a drab surtout, like a stage coachman? That is the Marquis of H., one of the most fortunate gamblers, i.e., speculators of the present day. During the war, his lordship acquired considerable sums of money by acting on his priority of political information, his policy being to make one of the party in power without holding office, and by this means be at liberty to act in the money market as circumstances required. Among the roués of the West, he has not been less successful in games of chance, until his coffers are crammed with riches. But it must be admitted he is liberal in his expenditure, and oftentimes generous to applicants, particularly sporting men, who seek his favors and assistance. The little club of sage personages who are mustered together comparing notes, in the corner of the Dutch Walk, are the paragraph writers for the morning and evening press. Very potent personages here, I assure you, for without their kind operation the public could never be gulled to any great extent. The most efficient of the group is the elegant-looking tall man who has just moved off to consult his patron, the Hebrew Star, who gives all his foreign information exclusively to the Leviathan of the press, of which paper Mr. A.R. is the representative. Next to him in importance, information, and talent is the reporter for the Globe and Traveler, GSME, a shrewd, clever fellow with considerable tact for business. Mr. F.Y. of the Courier stands near him on his left, and if he does but little with the stocks, he does that little well. The sandy-haired laddie with the high cheekbones and hawk-like countenance is M.K.H. of the Chronicle, but a wee bit of a wastrel in stock exchange affairs. And the mild-looking young gentleman, who is in tilde 128 tilde conversation with him, represents the mighty little man of the Morning Herald. The rest of the public prints are mostly supplied with stock exchange information by a bandy-legged Jew, a very Solomon in funded wisdom, who pens paragraphs at a penny a line for the papers, and puts into them whatever the projectors dictate, in the shape of a puff, at per agreement. The knot of swarthy-looking athletic fellows, many of whom are finger-linked together and wear rings in their ears, are American captains and traders from the shores of the Atlantic. That jolly-looking, ruby-faced old gentleman in black, who is laughing at the puritanical tale of his lank brother, Alderman Shaw, is the celebrated Grand City Admiral, Sir W. Curtis, a genuine John Bull, considered worth a plum at least, and the author of 1,000,000 of good jokes. Observe that quiet-looking, pale-faced gentleman now crossing the arena. From the smartness of his figure and the agility with which he bustles among the crowd, you would suppose him an active young man of about 25, while in fact, about 60 summers have rolled over his head. Such are the good effects of temperance, system, and attention to diet. Here he is known by the designation of Mr. Evergreen, a name, perhaps, affixed to him with a double meaning, combining in view the freshness of his age and his known attachment to theatricals, of which pursuits, as a recreation, he is devotedly fond. As a broker, lottery contractor, and a man of business, Mr. D-1 stands no. 1 for promptitude, probity, and the strictest sense of honor. Wealthy without pride, and learned without affectation, his company is eagerly sought for by a large circle of the literati of the day, with whom, from his anecdotal powers, he is in high repute. On stage affairs he is a living biographia dramatica. And Charles Matthews, it is said, owes much of his present celebrity to the early advice and persevering friendship of this worthy man. The pair 120 of tall, good-looking gentlemen on the French Walk are Messrs. J. and H.S. H, merchants in the city, and authors at the west end of the town. Here they have recently been designated by the title of their last whimsical production, and now figure as Messrs. Gaiety and Gravity, cognomens by no means inapplicable to the temper, feeling, and talent of the witty brothers. But come, said Principal, the change is now becoming too full to particularize, and as this is settling day at the stock exchange, suppose we just walk across to the alley, take a look at the market, and see how the account stands. In passing down St. Bartholomew Lane, accident threw in our way the respected chief magistrate of the city, John Garrett, Esq., of whose sire little Principal favored us with some entertaining anecdotes. Old Francis Garrett, who began business in the tea trade without cash, but with great perseverance and good credit, cut up at his death for near £400,000, and left his name in the firm to be retained for 7 years after his decease, when his posthumous share of the profits was to be divided among his grandchildren. As he generally traveled for orders himself, he was proverbial for dispatch, and has been known to call a customer up in the morning at 4 o'clock to settle his account or disturb his repose in the night, if old Francis was determined to make a lamp of the moon and pursue his route. A very humorous story is related of him. Arriving at Benson, near Henley, on a Sunday morning, just as his customer, a Mr. Newberry, had proceeded to church, old Francis was very importunate to prevail upon the servant maid to call him out, in order that he might proceed to Oxford that night. After much persuasion, she was induced to accompany him to the church, to point out the pew where her master sat. At their entrance, the eccentric figure of the tea broker caused a general movement of recognition among the congregation. But Francis, 130 nothing abashed, was proceeding up the aisle with his cash instead of prayer book in his hand, when his attention was arrested by the clergyman's text, "Paul we know, and Silas we know, but who art thou?" The singular coincidence of the words, added to the authoritative style of the pastor, quite staggered Francis Garrett, who, however, quickly recovering, made a low bow, and then, in a true business-like style, proceeded to apologize to the reverend and congregation for this seeming want of respect, adding he was only old Francis Garrett, of Thames Street, the tea broker, whom everybody knew, come to settle a small account with his friend Mr. Newberry. The eccentricity of the man was notorious, and this, perhaps, better than the apology, induced the clergyman to overlook the offense, but the story will long be remembered by the good people of Benson, and never fail to create a laugh in the commercial room among the merry society of gentlemen travelers. The son, who has deservedly risen to the highest civic honors, is a worthy and highly honorable man, whose conduct since he has been elected Lord Mayor reflects great credit upon his fellow citizens' choice. We had now mounted the steps which lead to the stock exchange, or, as principal, who, though one among them, may be said not to be one of them, observed, we had arrived at the wolves' den. The secret arcana of which place, with its curious intricacies and perplexing paradoxical systems and principles, I shall now, continued our friend, endeavor to explain. From which exposition the public will be able to see the monster that is feeding on the vitals of the country, while smiling in its face and tearing at its heart, yet cherished by it, as the Lacedaemonian boy cherished the wolf that devoured him. I am an enemy to all monopolies, said Principal, and this is one of the worst the country is infested with. A private or exclusive market, that is, a market into which the public have not the liberty or privilege of either going to make, or to see made bargains in their own persons, is one where the most sinister arts are likely to prevail. The stock exchange is of this description, and accordingly is one where the public are continually gulled out of their money by a system of the most artful and complicated traffic calculated to raise the hopes of novices, to puzzle the wits of outdoor speculators, and sure to have the effect of diminishing the property of those who are not members of the fraternity. 15. One of the principles of the stock exchange is that the public assist against themselves, which is not the less true than paradoxical. It is contrary to the generally received opinion that stocks should either be greatly elevated or depressed, without some apparent cause. It is contrary to natural inference that they should rise not from the public sending in to purchase, or to buy or sell, which however frequently happens. It follows, therefore, that the former is occasioned by the arts of the interested stock jobbers, and the latter by outdoor speculators, who have the market price banged down upon them by those whose business and interest it is to fleece them all they can. In the language of the stock exchange, you must be either a bull or a bear, a buyer or a seller. Now, as it is not necessary you should have 1 shilling of property in the funds to embark in this speculation, but may just as well sell 100,000 pounds of stock as £1, according to the practice of time bargains, which is wagering contrary to law, so neither party can be compelled to complete their agreement, or to pay whatever the difference of the amount may be upon the stock when the account closes. All transactions. 15. The mode of exchanging stock in France is in public. A broker stands in the situation of an auctioneer and offers it to the best bidder. Are therefore upon honor, and whoever declines to pay his loss is posted upon a black board, declared a defaulter, shut out of the association, and called by the community a lame duck. It is not a little extraordinary, while the legislature and the judges are straining every nerve to suppress low gambling and punish its professors, they are the passive observers of a system pregnant with 10 times more mischief in its consequences upon society, and infinitely more vicious, fraudulent, and base than any game practiced in the hells westward of Temple Bar. But we are too much in the practice of gaping at a gnat and swallowing a camel, or the great subscription houses, such as White's, Brooks, and Boodle's, would not have so long remained uninterrupted in this particular, while the small fry that surround them, and which are, by comparison harmless, are persecuted with the greatest severity. As there is a natural disposition in the human mind for gambling, and as it is visible to all the world that many men, cobblers, carpenters, and other laborers, by becoming stock jobbers, are suddenly raised from fortunes of a few pounds to hundreds of thousands. Therefore every falling shopkeeper or merchant flies to this disinterested seminary with the same hope. But the jobbers, perceiving their transactions interrupted by these persons intruding in order to keep them at a distance, formed themselves into a body and established a market composed of themselves, excluding every person not regularly known to the craft. 16. As the brokers found difficulty always to meet with people that would accommodate them either to buy or sell without waiting in the regular. 16. An article in their bylaws expresses that no new member shall be admitted who follows any other trade or business, or in any wise is subject to the bankrupt laws. At the same time, it is curious to observe that most of them are either soi-disant merchants or shopkeepers. 133 market in the bank. To save themselves time, they got accommodated among these gamblers in buying or selling as they wished. At the same time, they gave the jobber 1/8% for such accommodation. As the loss was nothing to the broker, of course this imposition was looked over, because it saved his own time and did not diminish his own commission. 17. It is clear, therefore, that the stock exchange is a self-constituted body without any charter, but merely established at the will of the members, to the support of which a subscription is paid by each individual. They are ruled by bylaws and judged by a committee chosen from among themselves. This committee, as well as the members, are regularly reballoted once in every year. Of course, no person is admitted within the walls of this house who does not regularly pay his subscription. In this way has the stock market been established and forced from its original situation by a set of jobbers and brokers, who are all, it will be seen, interested in keeping their transactions from the eye of the public. These men being always ready either to buy or sell, renders it easy for the brokers to get their business done, having no trouble but merely stepping into the stock exchange. If a broker wants to buy 5,000 L stock or any other sum for a principal, the jobber will readily sell it, although perhaps possessing no part of it himself at the time, but will take his chance of other brokers coming to put him in possession of it, and may have to purchase the amount in 2 or 3 different transactions. 18. But in doing that he will take care to call the price lower than he sold at. 19. 17. If the system of the private market had tended to lessen the broker's commission, he would have gone or stood anywhere else to transact business for his principals. 18. This at present only applies to young beginners, but old jobbers who have enjoyed the system long enough have been put in possession of large fortunes, and are now enabled to buy into or sell out of their own names to the amount of hundreds of thousands. 19. Should other brokers not come into the market to sell to him, he is then obliged, at a certain hour of the day, to go among his brethren to get it at the most suitable price possible. This is sometimes the cause of a momentary rise, and what is known by the jobbers turning out bears for the day. A depression sometimes takes place on the same principle when they are bulls for a future day, and cannot take stock. After the stock is transferred from the seller to the buyer instead of the money, he will write you a draft on his banker, although he has no effects to discharge the same till such time as he is put in possession of it also by the broker whom he sold it to. And it sometimes occurs, such drafts having to pass through the clearing-house. 20. The principal is not certain whether his money is safe till the day following. In this way does the floating stock pass and repass through the stock exchange to and from the public, each jobber seizing and laying his hand on as much as he can, besides the 8%. Certain, which the established rule gives in their favor. The price frequently gives way, or rises much more to his advantage, which advantage is lost to the principals, and thrown into the pockets of middlemen by the carelessness and indolence of the broker, who will not trouble himself in looking out for such persons as he might do business with in a more direct way. 21. When the stock market was more public, that is, when they admitted the public by paying 6 pence a day, competitors for government loans were to be seen in numbers, which enabled ministers to make good bargains for the country. 22. 20. A room situated in Lombard Street, where the banking clerks meet for the mutual exchange of drafts. The principal business commences at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the balances are paid and received at 5 o'clock. 21. Query. When a broker has to buy and sell for 2 different principals, may he not act as a jobber also, and put the turns into his own pocket? In such cases, the jobbers are convenient cloaks to disguise the transaction. 22. The loans taken by Boyd & Co., Goldsmith, and others were generally contracted for upon much better terms for the country than those taken by the stock exchange. But as they were contending against what is known by the interests of the house, they all were ruined in their turns, as the jobbers could always depreciate the value of stocks by making sales for time of that they did not possess. But since the establishment of the present private market, the stock jobbers have been found to have so much power over the price of stocks, after loans had been contracted for, that real moneyed men, merchants, and bankers have been obliged to creep in under the wings of this body of gamblers, and be satisfied with what portion of each loan this junto pleases to deal out to them. In this way, little principal opened the secret volume of the stock exchange frauds, and expose to our view the vile traffic carried on there by the flat catchers of the money market. In ordinary cases, it would be a task of extreme peril for a stranger to intrude into this sanctum sanctorum. But as our friend, the broker, was highly respected, we were allowed to pass through unmolested a favor that will operate in suppressing our notice of certain characters whom we recognized within. It will, however, hardly be credited that in this place, where every man is by profession a gambler, and sharping is the great qualification, so much of their time is devoted to tricks and fancies that would disgrace a schoolboy. Among these, the most prominent is hustling a stranger, an ungenerous and unmanly practice that is too often played off upon the unsuspecting, who have been, perhaps, purposely invited into the den for the amusement of the wolves. Another point of amusement is flying a tile, or slating a man, as the phrases of the stock exchange describe it. An anecdote is told of one of their own members, which will best convey an idea of this trick. One who was ever foremost in slating his brothers or kicking about a new caster had himself just sported a new hat, but with prudence which is proverbial among the craft, he would leave his new tile at the counting house and proceed to the stock exchange in an old one kept for the purpose. This becoming known to some of the wags, members of the house, they dispatched a note and obtained the new hat, which no sooner made its appearance in the house than it was thrown up for general sport. A joke in which none participated more freely than the unsuspecting owner, whose chagrin may be very well conceived, when, on his return to his counting house from Capel Court, he discovered that he had been assisting in kicking his own property to pieces. Another trick of these wags is the screwing up a number of pieces of paper longitudinally with a portion of black ink inside them, and lying on the table before some person, whom they will endeavor to engage in serious conversation upon the state of the market, when it is 10 to 1 if he does not roll some of these twisters between his fingers, and from agitation or deep thought on his approaching losses, or the risk of his speculations, blacken his fingers and his face, to the horse-laughical amusement of the bystanders. One of the best among the recent jokes my friend Bob has depicted to the life. See plate, the fame of Mr. Wright's brown pony had often reached the ears of his brother brokers, but hitherto the animal himself was personally unknown. To obviate this difficulty, some sportive wight ascertained the stable where the old gentleman usually left his nag during the time he was attending the market, and by a well-executed forgery succeeded in bringing the pony to Capel Court, when, without further ceremony, he was introduced into the house during the high bustle of the market, to the no small amusement of the house and the utter astonishment of his owner. There is a new stock exchange established in Capel Court, where a number of Jews, shopkeepers, and tradesmen assemble, and jobbers who have emigrated from their friends in the upper house, some of whom have either been ducks or have retired out of it on some honorable occasion. But as all is conducted upon honor in this traffic of gambling, these men also set up the principle of honor, on which they risk what has been honorably brought away from their honorable fellow laborers in the principal vineyard. These men stand generally in the alley, and, hearing what is going on in the other market, as they speculate also upon the price established there, they will give advice to strangers who may be on the outlook to make, as they expect, a speedy fortune by dabbling in the stocks. If they find a person to be respectable, they will offer to do business with him on the principle of their brethren, and also exact the 1/8%, as they do trusting to his honor, that, although they do not know where he lives, he will appear on or before the settling day to balance the account and pay or receive the difference. 23. These jobbers speculate a great deal upon puts and calls, and will give a chance sometimes for a mere trifle. They have not, like the private market, the public generally to work upon, the bylaws in the stock exchange prohibiting any broker or jobber, being a regular member, from dealing with them, on pain of forfeiting his right to re-enter. But notwithstanding, some of the brokers, and even the jobbers inside, will run all risks when there appears a good chance of getting a turn on the price in their favor. From this cause, however, the alley or new stock exchange jobbers are obliged to gamble more directly with each other. Consequently, many get thrown to the leeward, and those who stand longest are generally such as have other resources from the trade or. 23. There have many lately entered into gambling transactions with these gentlemen, and have taken the profit so long as they were right in their speculations. But as soon as a loss came upon them, knowing they have no black board, they walk themselves coolly away with what they get. 138 occupation they carry on elsewhere. From this place, called by the members of the House Lower Tartary, or Hell, the next step of degradation, when obliged to waddle out of the court, is the rotunda of New Botany Bay. Here may be seen the private market in miniature. A crowd of persons calling themselves jobbers and brokers, and, of course, a market to serve any person who will deal with them. The same system of ear-wigging, nods, and winks is apparent, and the same fiddling, rasping, and attempts at overreaching each other, as in Upper Tartary or the Den. And of course, while they rasp and fiddle, their principals have to pay for the music. But as no great bargains are contracted here, these good things being reserved for a select few in the private market, the jobbers, who are chiefly of little note, are glad if they can pick up a few shillings for a day's job, by cutting out money stock for servants and other people's small earnings. Here may be seen my lord's footman from the west end of the town, who is a great politician and knows for a certainty that the stocks will be down. Therefore he wants to sell out his 50L savings to get in at less. Here also may be some other lord's footman who has taken a different view of things and wants to buy. And although their respective brokers might meet each other and transact business in a direct way at a given price, notwithstanding they either do, or they pretend to have given the jobbers the turn, 24, that is, the one sold at 1/8, and the other bought at 1/4. This market, as in the alley, is ruled by the prices established in the private gambling market, which being the case, some will have messengers running to and from this market to see how the puffs and bangs proceed. And if they can saddle their neighbor before he knows the price is changed, it is thought good jobbing. From the stock, 24 some act both as jobbers and brokers, and will charge a commission for selling their own stock. Exchange to the rotunda, everywhere it will be perceived, a system of gambling and deception is practiced upon the public, and the country demoralized and injured by a set of men who have no principle but interest, and acknowledge no laws but those of gain. As this was settling day, we had the gratification to observe one unfortunate howled out of the craft for having speculated excessively, and not being able or willing to pay his differences, he was compelled to waddle 25, which he did, with a slow step and melancholy countenance, accompanied by the hootings and railings of his unfeeling tribe, as he passed down the narrow avenue from Upper Tartary, proclaimed to the lower regions and the world. A lame duck. 25, those who become ducks are not what are termed true jobbers. They are those who either job or speculate, or are half brokers and half jobbers, and are left to pay outdoor speculators' accounts. Or if a jobber lend himself to get off large amounts of stock, in cases where the broker does not wish the house to know he is operating, he generally gives him an immediate advantage in the price in a private bargain. This is termed being such a one's bawd. The Isle of Wight. 140.